What happens when a neighboring country who's on a fiat standard prints money to fund a war with your country, which has adopted a Bitcoin standard? And how does one respond? Is the only way to also start printing fiat like crazy? So this is cool. So one thing I thought a lot about in the past was, why doesn't a country just print a ton of money and buy all the Bitcoin? We'll see. Well, there's a price to pay for heavy printing is you devalue your currency, as we're seeing all over the world. Inflation, which is debasement, is eating everybody alive all over the world. But when you increase money supply by 40% in 2 years, that's going to happen. It's just pretty clear. Now, before we talk about this, let's talk about the sustainability of a war and how it's a little bit different, because we have an analog now we can actually look at. Now, if a country just prints a bunch of money, currency, fiat, to fund a war, again, the currency will become debased. So, for example, Zimbabwe, no matter how many dollars they print, they're not going to be going to war with anybody because their currency is worthless. Many other countries I could list off that have the same problem. But ultimately, if a country cannot use its currency to purchase resources it needs for war, then it's going to be unable to sustain that war for very long. And we can look at these headlines here out of Russia. Again, they can print up all the rubles they want, but they can't buy the parts they need to maintain their tanks, jets, missiles, etc. And recently, we've been hearing more about Russia running out of semiconductor chips for its missiles, running out of artillery shells, and its jets are literally falling out of the sky due to its parts failure. Russia is actually getting drones from Iran to help them. Like, who would have thought, a superpower, a so-called military superpower like Russia has to knock on Iran's door to help? Again, this is also part of this whole new war around controlling the money supply, embargoes, etc., and controlling semiconductors is so critical for the future. And that's why we have the bigger problem, China, Taiwan, down the line. But we're not going to go there now. It's beyond the scope of this conversation. So let's talk about Jason Lowery. And I did a really cool video with him a while back. I will add a link here if anybody wants to see it. It is fascinating. But this reminded us of the conversation with Jason Lowery. And he knows a thing or two about war and funding wars. And Jason made the point that historically, all global currencies have been proof of work. He didn't mean proof of work in the sense of Bitcoin, but proof of work in reserve assets to be backed by the expenditure of real energy. For example, throughout history, there was the gold standard. Empires like the Romans, the British, etc., rose and fell on the back of gold. And that's why you hear things like, who has the gold rules? But gold is a classic proof of work system. And then after the Nixon dollar situation we covered a while ago, that all fell apart. But then you had the oil extraction and processing becoming energy to fund kind of making the dollar a global reserve asset, and on and on and on. You can see here, it is all related to energy and some type of proof of work. Now, Bitcoin, of course, is proof of work because you have to burn energy in the form of electricity to mine it and secure the network. Hence, in order for a currency to be as useful as the reserve asset, it has to be tied to energy and extracted with work. No matter what currency a country uses, that currency still has to be tied to something. And it has to be valuable enough to be traded for the resources that are required to wage war. That's the story. So I don't think it's possible for a country to print all it wants to get access to what it wants. And we've discovered how the world is so interconnected after peak globalization. Now the warfare is about controlling the money and controlling the semiconductors. That's probably the future.